So it's my great pleasure this morning to introduce Dianne Marsh, who is one of our alums from the Department of Computer Science. Dianne graduated with a bachelor's in 1986 and a master's. She went off to work, decided she didn't have enough of us, and came back and got her master's. And I got the privilege of working with Dianne on her master's thesis, and she completed that in 1992, right, there we go. She did her master's before her PhD, yeah, before her bachelor's. So, and after that, Dianne has gone off and had sort of a very, very fascinating career. In fact, I kind of use Dianne as an example every once in a while when I want to explain to prospective students about the variety of things you can do with a degree in computer science. I don't remember all the details, but I know when Dianne left, one of the things she did was she went to work for a startup working on the human genome problem and using a lot of parallel computing back in those days. That was a pretty new and fancy thing to do, very exciting. After that, at one point, she had a consulting company for how long?
13 years.
13 years. And in fact, hired some of our other alums to work for her. And for the last 7 years? 9 years. One day I got a surprise. She was at Netflix. So after having her consulting company, she went off to Netflix and is currently the director of content security. And with that, I'm going to stop talking because I could talk a lot more about Dianne. She's actually a fun person, a great friend, and a whole lot of other things. But we'll stick with mostly technical stuff, and I'll turn it over to Dianne. Thanks, Dianne.
So, little known fact, Linda was my advisor when I was in grad school here for my master's degree. And my master's thesis was on parallel object-oriented computing. And we decided to, I thought, you know what, I'd like to submit this, a paper from this thesis to a conference. And there was an IEEE conference in Hawaii. And I got to tell you, if you're going to submit a paper to a conference, you submit it in Hawaii, right? On the off chance, on the off chance that we would get to go, and we got to go. Of course, the weather did not disappoint. I believe Linda was delayed by about 24 hours because potent. But we did get to spend one Christmas, New Year's time frame in Hawaii. So anyways, last of the personal stuff out of that. Yeah, so I'm Dianne Marsh. I lead device and content security for Netflix. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. For the first 5 years I was at Netflix, I led the engineering tools team. And so even in Netflix, I figured out how to do change. Before I start the talk, I want to give a call out to a watch party we have going on in Traverse City at 20 Fathoms. So the Women in Tech group is on site in the Traverse City location. And I just wanted to say hi to all of them and thank you for coming. Yay. What I want to talk about today is change. And change is something that I think is a little scary. And so I think we all face change though, right? Change is the one constant in our lives. And so I thought that we would talk about change. There's a lot of change going on in the world. There's a lot of change going on in the university. There's a lot of change going on in the College of Computing. And so I thought we would start with that today. And hopefully I'll be able to give you, all of you, regardless of whether you're students or staff or faculty or just a member of the community, some concept of navigating through change. Change comes in a variety of different ways. Change comes because things happen, right, to you. So change happens to you. And there are also changes that you enact, right? And so I want to talk about both of these things because I think that they're very different about the impact that they have on you. And I want to give you a warning that at the end of my session today, we're going to do a little exercise about how you evaluate those two different kinds of change. How do you feel about it? How do you perceive that? How do you act? So last night in our panel discussion, I mentioned that it can be really difficult for introverts specifically, and for deep thinkers more particularly, to act in the moment and to respond in the moment and to shoot from the hip in a brainstorming session. And so what I found is it's really helpful if I can give you all a heads up that we're going to do this exercise. So maybe the folks that think more deeply about things will be spinning up a background thread about change in their own minds while I'm talking. I won't mind at all. So let's talk about what's the North Star for change? The North Star for change really is what's in the best interest of the company, the university, of the individual, right? And I think that as we all face change, the College of Computing is facing some change right now. You want to think about, the broad concept of like, who is this change impacting? Is this in the best interest of the college, right? Or at Netflix, is this in the best interest of Netflix? And at Netflix, is it in the best interest of the subscribers, right? When you think about it that way, you also need to think about, how do I fit in to that change? So how do I as an individual perceive that change? How can I drive that change? How can I respond to that change? How do I feel about that change? And I think change can be, like I said, uncomfortable. How many people feel like change that they've had is uncomfortable to them? Yeah, it's always uncomfortable. With that discomfort, though, is where we get growth. Through that discomfort, we get growth. If everything stayed the same, and I got to tell you, there are some things I'd really like just to stay the same. It would be really comfortable. But I've had the opportunity to have change, thrust upon me and have that turn into something that was really good, or for me to make a change and have that turn into something really good. Even when it turns into something that's not so great, you learn from that change. And, I always sit back and I think, I am where I am today because of all the things that have happened up to this point. I can't say, that one thing right there, that thing, I hated that thing that happened, that change that happened was really uncomfortable for me, and it wasn't great, but I learned from it, right? I learned from it. And so if I want to dismiss, if I want to embrace where I am today, I really have to embrace all of the things that led to that growth. I do want to make a distinction though around being healthy, right? That change needs to be healthy. It can't put you in a place where you are in danger mentally or physically, right? Draw the line at a place that puts you any change that puts you in a bad place. And with change, I hope you'll all come with empathy, because what we just talked about was the discomfort that we all feel from change. Change that I'm driving, I'm probably really, really comfortable about for the most part, right? But I might be making all of you uncomfortable with the change that I'm driving. And so I need to be empathetic, and I need to think about how you're perceiving that change. And I hope that that's one of the things that you'll think about when we're talking about this later this afternoon. All right. When we go through this exercise, I want you to think about change that's happened in your life. What did you feel? How did you act? How did other people feel? How did they act? All right. That's your background thread. So I'm going to tell you a story about change. I work for a company that is pretty embracing of change. Netflix is one of those companies that doesn't sit still. This can be very uncomfortable, I got to tell you. But let's start with how old. Does anybody know how old Netflix is? What year Netflix was founded? Anybody want to make a guess? 2005? 2010? Anybody got another answer?
95.
Laura?
I'm pulling up my slides. I have this.
Yeah, so the answer is that Netflix was founded in 1997, so it's 25 years old this year. I think that's probably surprising to many of you because this company is still run in many ways like a really fast moving startup, you know. Okay, a lot of change has happened in those 25 years. So I'm going to walk you through some of that change, not because I think anybody needs to replicate the steps that Netflix went through, but because I think that there are some good lessons in how the company has reacted to change and continues to embrace change. Netflix is a data-driven company. We have a bunch of data that helps us understand, you know, what we want to do, what's in the best interest of subscribers. We run tons of A/B tests all the time. You all are probably in about 10 A/B tests right now individually, and you're probably not in the same tests as the people that are sitting next to you. So that helps us understand, what do you like? You know, what resonates with people? At the number of subscribers that we have really good data to understand how that plays out across our subscribers overall. And this has really helped us to understand what's in the best interest of our subscribers. Netflix also has an inspirational leader. If you know nothing else about Reed Hastings, you know that well, I'll tell you that this man knows something about everything. I've been in meetings with him, and he has known minute details about what I work on that is just surprising to me that he understands at that level. But he also is able to weave a really big picture story about the direction of the company and where he thinks we should go. He stays engaged, he stays interested. It's not always delightful to have his ideas because sometimes it's, you know, really scary and out there and change oriented. But he has a lot of ideas. Netflix is a company that tries a lot of things, embraces failure though. So we make a mistake, we fix it, right? And so failure is not something that we say that's a bad thing, especially in A/B tests. You know, failure is a pretty expected outcome. And so we're really motivating our product managers, particularly, to try new things and to see what works. The company started out as a mail DVD service. How many of you had DVDs back in the day, right? Tell you a little story about that. You know, I was a new parent on parental leave with my son, I guess, around the time that we had DVDs. And I would be up late feeding him, you know, during the day, feeding him, whatever. By the way, the show of choice that I was binge watching on DVD was 24. Maybe a little too much insight into my personality. And when the noise that would come on, his head would just snap to the screen. This is my little baby. I'm sure I've not done no damage. He's 16. He seems perfect. But it was funny because one day my husband came home and he's like, "Were we going to watch the rest of that show?" And I said, "No, Tom. I took it to the mailbox. The mail is going out, and if I get it in the mail today, I can get a new one by tomorrow." And like, you know, no, I'm sorry, I'm not waiting for you. So that was the start of Netflix cheating. But let's talk about the DVD business a little bit. That fast movement of DVDs through the post office put a lot of pressure on the post office and their sorting machines. It also put a lot of pressure on the DVDs. They were coming back cracked and scratched, and, you know, like all kinds of damage was happening. And so Netflix, in order to have a profitable business, needed to solve some problems in the US mail system. And so probably one thing that's probably a little known is that we did some innovation around sorting machines and gave that back to the post office. And so this is one of those things, you have to sometimes do things to affect the ecosystem in order to be able to do the things you want to do. Blockbuster. Who remembers Blockbuster? Who remembers late fees? I was really bad with late fees. So Blockbuster was one of those businesses that they had a really good business model. You know, we would all go and rent movies and we would pay late fees. And I guess if we didn't rewind, remember you didn't rewind your video, you had to pay extra money. Anyways, Netflix disrupted that business. But Blockbuster was like, whoever, I'm extrapolating, like I'm really not sure this is how this went, but they had an opportunity to buy Netflix way back when and they declined. because they had a business model that they thought would survive. Apparently it did not. What happened though to make that helped Netflix make that leap from DVD to streaming? Some things had to happen in the ecosystem. Unlimited internet. I remember having to pay for every minute I was connected to the internet, right? The speed of internet. Those things had to happen to make streaming even possible. This visionary leader in Reed Hastings, who wanted to do this video streaming business, knew he couldn't go from A to C. He had to stop at B with the DVD along the way, right? So sometimes you have to work with what you have. You always have to work with the physical constraints of the world that you're in. One early decision that was really impactful that I think was at risk of not happening was that Netflix had developed a device and a streaming device. And at the verge of putting it out in the marketplace, decided it's probably isn't a great idea. How will we set up our device partners outside of this one device that we're going to create on an equal footing to be able to want to contribute to this ecosystem so that we can have a ubiquity of devices so that consumers can bring the devices they have and stream on those devices. If we have a preference for our own device, if we even set the idea in the industry that we have a preference for our own device, right? So instead of launching this device as Netflix, they spun it off, and that's Roku. It would have probably been a good business model to have that device, right? It was better not to have it. One of the things I think that has led to Netflix's success, like I said, is really being data driven, but understanding what's that key metric that you're looking at, like what drives your business. And we have to know what our key metric is. Everybody in the company has to be aligned on that key metric and understand what it is. That helps to unify us in what our objectives are. It helps to set that North Star for what's this decision you're making? What's the decision framework around this decision? How are you contributing to this key metric? So what's the equivalent of a key metric in all of your work, in the College of Computing, in the businesses that you're in? Netflix likes to embrace industry standards, but we're also really mindful of not being a special snowflake. So what do I mean by this? If we need a very specific deliverable from a partner, for example, let's talk about CDN. It's probably the best example we have. CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. There are many of them out in the industry. For the first few years of streaming, we used an industry standard CDN. But it's a lot more fully featured than what we actually need. And those features are a distraction from other things that we need that the rest of the industry doesn't need. So you have a decision point. Do we stay with the industry standard and try to drive the change that we need into that product, which won't be good for the company that has that product, right? Because the rest of their customers don't need it. It'll be great for Netflix though, right? Or do we build our own product that is very specific to our use case? Most of the time, you would think maybe you do the former, right? You just you drive that industry partner to making those changes. But if you really think about it, there are cases here where it's not in the best interest of the company. Ultimately, they're going to not serve you well, right? So if you make this determination that they're not going to serve you well, and I am talking about this like it was a clear-cut decision, it was a very hard-fought debate at the time, right? But it has worked out really well for us not to drive those changes that only Netflix needed into the CDN, and instead build our own open standard and be able to put that out in the industry and affect the actual change that we needed in that standard specific to streaming, as opposed to trying to, put this square peg in a round hole. Open source has been another case. It's very similar to that. And so my first team at Netflix Engineering Tools developed an open source product around continuous delivery. So being able to build, deploy, test in an automated fashion your services so that you could do continuous delivery into, in our case, Amazon. This is something that Netflix needed really badly, but it's not our secret sauce. It's not undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? It is undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's what the whole industry needs. So why not give this back to the industry overall? Why not put this in a foundation and let the industry take this open source project and do what they want with it and continue to grow it for Netflix's needs? So those are some of the things I think contribute to that change. But you might wonder, why did you do this? Will this give your competitors a leg up in being able to do their own continuous delivery? Again, it's not the secret sauce of streaming is how you deliver software. It's across the industry. But maybe the answer was more pragmatic than that. Maybe the answer was you pay a pioneer tax when you go off on your own. Remember that old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If you're trying to do your own path and you keep it just to yourself, then an industry standard will develop and everybody else will go on that path. And then you're going to pay that pioneer tax again when you try to reintegrate with the rest of the world. So don't pay that price twice. Pay the pioneer tax once, bring everybody else along, and then we can all move forward together. And it's really good for the industry too. Like I said, we have a visionary leader, and the visionary leaders in Netflix really anticipate change. So one of the areas where this has resulted in at Netflix is building our own studio and creating our own content. This is an expensive endeavor. Again, like this did not come lightly. How did we tiptoe into this? We tiptoed into it a little bit with some licensed content, right? Now we have wholly owned content. We still license a lot of originals from the studios, but it means that we have a lot more flexibility around licensing than we had before. And so it's been a really great move for us, albeit expensive, but in the long term, probably the right choice now that we're spending an incredible amount of money on content. Let's talk about incremental change. So we've been talking about some pretty transformational change, right? Some pretty big leaps. But let's step back and talk a little bit about incremental change. And like I said earlier, sort of working within the constructs that you have in front of you. I joined Netflix, like I said, like Linda said, in 2013, and I came into an organization. Netflix has this concept of freedom and responsibility. And freedom is a very big F, and responsibility needs to be on par with freedom, right? But sometimes people forget that. And the freedom was really high. You could choose your programming language, you could choose your version control system, you could choose a bunch of different things at Netflix. For the engineering tools team, this was not the right answer. This meant my team was being spread way too thin across many different things that they needed to do. And it meant that we couldn't overall serve the organization well because we were spread too thin to actually deliver the value that we needed to deliver along one trajectory, or two, not 10, right? So I faced this big challenge, this freedom responsibility culture. Some people were pretty adamant that they were going to be able to make these decisions. So how do I, a brand new employee at Netflix, navigate freedom responsibility and tell them we're only going to support, this is the path we're going to support? And so I defined this notion of a paved road. And I said, we're going to develop along the paved road. Our promise to you will be that the things that we develop on this paved road will get you the most support. Like this, we will promise this is our innovation path. The things that are along this path will be integrated with each other, and all of the work will be going on that paved road. Now you can go off on an unpaved road, take your knapsack, maybe a bottle of water, we'll be happy to try to see if it can get you back on the road later. But, you know, if you want good support, you should stay on the paved road. Luckily, this resonated with most people. But I did have this really uncomfortable meeting with this leader who said, Dianne, we do not want to change version control systems. We think it is our freedom to stay on this old version control system. And I said, well, here are the implications of that. Let me give you context, right? Netflix also has an idea of context, not control. Let me give you context about the impact that that has on my team. Wasn't necessarily influenced by that. And I said, and let me tell you what the impact is. It's fine if you want to stay on that version control system, but now you own it. So, you know, you are going to have to manage this version control system for the rest of the company. This is the responsibility piece. This also ended in my favor. He was like, change my mind. That paved road concept has really served us well. It's helped us be more sustainable as we grew. It probably worked really, really well when there were just a few hundred engineers. We have 2,000 engineers at Netflix now. It's just not a sustainable concept. All right, let's see. Also around barriers to change, a little close to home. I walked through Fisher Hall this morning, specifically looking for one thing. Is there still only a men's bathroom on the 3rd floor? There is still only a men's bathroom on the 3rd floor. Thankfully, there's a note that says, go to Reiki Hall, 3rd floor for the women's bath. But this is, I want to bring this up here because this is a metaphor for some of those, for a very good example potentially of some of those barriers to change, like very physical barriers. It would be really hard and really costly to put another bathroom in Fisher Hall, I suppose. It would be really costly and really hard probably to, well, I mean, we could think of lots of ways you could address this, right? Like Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, this would be a women's bathroom. Tuesdays, Thursdays, this would be a men's. I don't think that would work. Those barriers to change, those physical barriers exist in a lot of ways. In software, they sometimes exist with old legacy systems that we have to work around. In diversity and inclusion, they show up as practices and behaviors that continue along the path that we've been on for a very long time. Figuring out how to work around those barriers to being able, that barriers to change is fundamental to moving forward. The sign is at least effective, right? It's not perfect, but it's effective. Solutions aren't always going to be perfect, but the perfect is the enemy of the good. We're going to figure it out. Let's keep figuring out how to move forward. All right, let's talk a little bit about discomfort. I talked about a lot of change that happened at Netflix. How many of you, if you had worked at Netflix, would have probably felt, and you can cop to this or not, a little uncomfortable with all of that change happening over the many years? I'll tell you, like, I live it, and it's more than I just told you about, and it is uncomfortable, right? Now, the good news is not all change affects every single person, right? And what I don't want you to do is to feel like if you go to one of these companies with a visionary leader that changes really fast, that you're going to be on this, you know, this constant wave of discomfort, right? That's not actually how it is. It's just that being able to continue to build that confidence that this change is going to move us forward helps, right? But then also making sure that you maintain a healthy relationship with change and with yourself to understand, you know, is this working for me? Is it not? As long as what you're doing in your company is in the best interest of the company and meets your objectives of being healthy along your moral compass, all of the things that you need to be able to stay healthy physically and mentally, then you're aligned with that company. When that doesn't happen, that's when it's time to start thinking about forging a path out of there. And I will tell you that there have been different times in my career when, you know, you can't just walk away, right? Where you have to actually have a plan to get out. And I'm not talking about physical or psychological safety, right? Sometimes those things have to happen immediately. But there are times when it's just, maybe this isn't exactly what I want to do. Forge a path, figure out what that path is. you're in control of your own career. Companies, you know, have a relationship with you. Universities have a relationship with you to serve in the best interest of the consumers, of the companies, of the college, right? When that doesn't work for you, it's your responsibility to figure out what your path needs to look like. Nobody else is going to manage your career for you. So know yourself. Let's see, do I have anything else I want to talk about? What does a healthy environment look like? A healthy environment encourages debate, right? It provides context about decisions. And most of all, you get to a point where a decision has been made, and if you don't agree with that change, disagree and commit. So move forward. Disagree and commit is one of the most important elements of that. Everything is important. Healthy debate, provide context, disagree and commit. A lot of changes going on here at MTU, right? In the College of Computing. Maybe some of you feel some discomfort from that. How can you bring those concepts of healthy debate, being able to provide context and disagree and commit into some of those changes that are happening? How can you also bring a notion of collaboration into those decisions? Sometimes you can get caught up in what's best for a team, a college, you know, some smaller construct. Put it in the grand scheme of things of what's in the best interest of the university, the company, the subscribers, and then weigh how is this going to impact. When you're weighing, how is this going to impact all of them? Think about, what does that other person need, or that other team, or that other you know, department in the university? What do they need? What do they fear? It's only when you really can put yourself in their shoes, empathy, that you can understand how to build a solution with someone instead of in conflict with them. All right, I hope you've taken something away from this talk, some tools around change. And now it's time for the exercise I promised. So what I'd like all of you to do is to have a conversation at your table, or if your table's too small, maybe you want to consolidate with another table. Again, freedom and responsibility, just saying. But talk about, you know, sort of, I will leave that to you, Chin. You all, I'm not worried about a paved road today. Although I do need the bridge to be open when I go home tomorrow. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around and butt in on all of your conversations, if you're comfortable with that, and hear about what you're thinking about. Where have you encountered change that was good? Where have you encountered change that wasn't good? Where have you generated change, you know, to the extent of pulling other people into that change and maybe not been as thoughtful about it as you could have, and maybe it backfired? You know, what was the impact of the change, both change that you created and change that was foisted upon you? Thank you very much. I'm happy to communicate with any of you in the future. I have some business cards if you want those. Linda knows how to reach me. Dennis knows how to reach me. I'm happy to stay in touch. Keep doing the important things that this university is doing. We need all of you to solve the problems of today and tomorrow. Thank you.